What's up, everybody? I want to thank y'all for tuning in to episode 3 of The Grit. Last week we touched on gentrification and the power of the black dollar. Mm-hmm. And this week, we're returning to y'all with a little bit of a controversial topic. We're talking about guns and gun safety. It's been a hot button issue all over the country, as we've discussed. School shootings have happened, mass shootings have happened. And we see every day in the news is some new issue where Congress or senators or state representatives are talking about proposing new legislation about guns and gun safety. Mm-hmm. So, that's a topic that we feel like we should delve into for today's show. And, but prior to hopping into all of that, we want to discuss, just touch in with the panel, see how everybody's week went. Mm-hmm. How was your week, Veronica? What did you do this week? What was the highlight of your week?
Well, the highlight of my week was I hung out with a few friends, and hanging out with a few friends is always good.
Absolutely,
so
that's
always
right.
Catching up on things, and also I hung out with my daughter. So that's my weekend.
That's what's up. That's
it was very chill, very relaxed.
Good. What about you, Tris?
Right, cool. Well, my week was pretty productive. Pretty much got a few things done health-wise. I'm trying to get myself together. I'm kind of going through physical therapy right now, so I just completed that. I had a few back issues going on, but I'm getting back to normal. Other than that, this week, I worked on a lot of performing arts stuff. And actually this weekend, I got a chance to hang out with Obi Trice and Swift McVeigh from D12, so that was a good highlight.
Okay.
So they had a concert down at the Diesel Concert Lounge in New Baltimore, Michigan, which I ain't never even heard of that until that day. But yeah, other than that, it was pretty cool.
Real Detroit hip hop scene right there. Speaking of Obi Trice and D12, but how about your week, Aaron? What did you do this week?
Well, this week I of course worked, but I also was able to attend the Women of Color Task Force Career Conference.
And that was at the University of Michigan,
at the University of Michigan. And it was a really great experience just having all the women together. I mean, you had women of color, you had, women who weren't of color, but just coming together. They do professional development, personal development. It's a lot of networking. It's a lot of training. And I got a lot of good nuggets. And I met quite a few people there for businesses, Black-owned businesses. Mm-hmm. As one of my the shirt that I have on is one of the actual business owners that I was able to, just talk to. And she was really cool, down to earth. And it's called CFRANKS. And what she does, she has like a t-shirt line, and it has Detroit, and it has like all of the different, like back in the day, old school, either the high schools, city officials. You have like different landmarks like the Mercury Theater or whatever over there on Grand River. You got Perry Drugs on here, Farmer Jack, just different things just to really represent Detroit. So it's a dope shirt, and it's a dope company. So I really had fun just learning, just getting to know different people, and just really networking. So it was a great opportunity.
And there was a really interesting keynote speaker for the event,
too,
right?
The keynote speaker was April Ryan, is the White House correspondent. I don't want to say this, but what people might remember her from is when I forget exactly who said this comment, trying to call her Miss Piggy. And it's funny because she addressed that, and she was like, well, I thought Miss Piggy was fabulous. She was like, they don't know, I was calling myself Miss Piggy back in like college or something. She was saying, she said she think Miss Piggy is fabulous, and she is right. But she's been the correspondent for 21 years at the White House, within the press. And I love her message because her thing was, the press is the people who is supposed to uphold, the country or the government to what is supposed to be done. So in regards to, freedom of the press, it's supposed to press them to make sure that they're upholding everything that, they're set out to do. Mm-hmm. So she was saying she's been the correspondent for 21 years, and she's even said, I've asked all the hard questions of from all the presidents, not just with Trump. She's been there for Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and for Obama, and she was just like, I just want the truth. But her message was amazing. The speaking was amazing. The event was amazing. So that's what I did.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
All right.
I love that.
It sounds like everybody had a pretty productive week.
Yeah.
I had a pretty productive week as well. Yeah. Not to, come to me, but no, I had a pretty productive week as well. I got to spend time with my children. I have two sons, both of whom celebrated birthdays this week.
Okay.
So that was pretty
Okay.
exciting. That's pretty exciting. Yeah. Otherwise, just family time, working with clients who I have on the side for for my professional business that I have on the side. So it was all in all a very productive, good week.
Yeah,
But,
that's good.
yeah, so that's what I like to hear. I like to hear
Right,
everybody had a
okay.
great week before jumping into Sunday evening's episode of The Grit.
Hello, my name is Tristan. I am one of the co-hosts for The Grit. I'm also an NRA certified instructor. My job is to teach gun safety and safety laws for people that are trying to pursue their CPL licenses. Today's episode is going to be very special, but it's also going to be very controversial. There are going to be a lot of topics in regards to the recent subject matters of guns, whether you're for or against them, and there will actually be displays of actual firearms. There will be no live rounds, just for everyone's safety, of course. But today's episode is for adults that are legal to actually carry firearms. And remember, you all, guns don't kill people. People kill people.
But, like I said, like I touched on earlier, this week's episode deals with guns and gun safety. It's always a hot button issue. It seems like the talk about guns in this country is never at rest. You always have an issue that pops up. Ever since I can remember, it started with 9/11, and that triggered the whole gun mass hysteria in my lifetime, it seems like. But ever since then, it's always been something, whether it was, or actually Columbine. Actually,
I was thinking that, Columbine.
Yeah, Columbine set it off before that. We're dating ourselves a little bit. But Columbine seemed to set it off, and then you've had events that happen all throughout time. Even in this year alone, 2018, there's been a difference in numbers, but I've seen anywhere between 8 and 20 school shootings that have happened within the country in the last just 2.5-3 months since we've been in 2018, and so it's been a real hot button issue, widely talked about everywhere from interpersonal. The four of us talk about it on a regular basis, and it's something that we see discussed everywhere, all the way up. And one of the issues now that's being talked about is actually arming teachers in schools. I know that's I saw Aaron kind of took a sigh on that. Tristan's kind of weighing the option, but we'll toss it to you. We'll toss it to you, Aaron. How do you feel about this whole issue of potentially putting firearms in the hands of teachers in school buildings in order to protect students against these mass shootings?
I think it's crazy. 2 reasons. One, because a recent article that I was reading about how the Michigan House were tackling just different issues in regards to like gun control and figuring out what they want to do. So the one was, arming teachers with guns. So what came of that was proposed is that teachers would get 80 hours of training with guns. They didn't specify exactly, and then that the gun would be locked into a safe that was fingerprint. You can unlock it with your fingerprint. The details, they didn't go too far into details, but I just think it's ridiculous. And the reason why is because I'm a hairstylist as well, so I've had clients who are teachers throughout the years, and just everything that they tell me that they have to do is like, now you want to add on them policing or being security for in the event that something happens in regard like a school shooting or something. So I just think that's kind of ridiculous, and I don't think that's enough time to actually effectively train somebody, because you go through these 80 hours, but say if God forbid anything happens within that next few months, year, or whatever, is this a consistent training? You know what I'm saying? Like, when is that training really effective?
And I know, Tristan, it looked like you were kind of like in between on the issue, maybe one way or the other. How do you feel about the arming teachers?
Well, here's what I think about it. First and foremost, when I was in school, we had metal detectors anyway.
Yeah.
And then, more importantly, we had security guards. So it's kind of like, okay, well, in the situations of these mass shootings in these different areas, where are the metal detectors? Where are the safety precautions? Where are the security guards? So those kind of factor into everything as well. But as a backup plan to, if you just so happen to bypass those procedures, I do think that the teachers should be able to carry firearms, because clearly with everything that's been going on these days, I I believe that the teachers should have an opportunity to be able to protect themselves as well as the other students in the event that they happen to bypass those other procedures.
Now, do you think it should be a mandatory situation where, one of the things I've heard proposed is that 1 out of every 5 teachers in a school building will undergo this training and will be armed? Do you think it should be that, or do you think it should be a volunteer basis where if a teacher says, I want to do this, then they should be able to step up? What's your opinion on that?
I think it should be on a voluntary basis, because if there is one particular teacher that's singled out of 5 people to have to bear that responsibility, that's a lot of responsibility for one person. Mm-hmm. And then more importantly, just so happens, what if the student actually finds out who that teacher is?
Yeah, that's true.
So that's a liability in itself, because it's like, oh, well, if I know Mrs. Such and Such is the bearer of arms, so to speak, over here, then that means that it's at least 4 more classrooms that she has to get to, and even in order to even get to me.
I see.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So that in itself can be a liability.
And I know Veronica, that Tristan touched on the topic of metal detectors and in schools and things like that, and that's something that's really prevalent in the inner cities. And I know Veronica had touched on it a little bit ago while we were off camera discussing a little bit, but you said you felt like that could be a deterrent in these school shootings and these mass shootings.
Yeah, because I remember when I was in school, we had metal detectors and we never had no issue. So it's like, hey, why not put those in all schools if this is a major issue around the world? So I definitely think that it should be all over, not just in urban communities.
Yeah, that was something we had too. I mean, I saw it every day I walked into school.
Absolutely.
It was like we would get to school 5 to 10 minutes early because we knew we had to wait in the line to go through metal detectors and get scanned, and we had security guards in schools and things like that. And I even have school-age children right now, and I know one of the things that they do is after the school day starts, they'll lock doors. So you can't get into school until you actually chime into a video conference. If you do need to come to the school, you have to be on video. You have to identify yourself before you even have access to the schools. And, I wonder if these places that are experiencing these school shooters and things like that have those measures in place, because you don't typically see these mass shootings in schools in urban areas.
No. Right.
You see them in a lot of rural areas, and you wonder, and on one hand, you don't want the school to feel like a prison. You don't want the school to feel like it's on a lockdown area. But on the other hand, it's like, how do you balance out that measure of safety and making sure that everybody remains safe?
I can tell you one thing. When I was in middle school, I went to Miller Middle School. We had gang squad at our school. Like, there was no...
we had gang squad, too.
It wasn't any of that type of... No, we had the metal detectors here. We had the principal with the wands waving everybody down, opening up the book bag. Let me see. In middle school, hey...
It got real.
But like I said,
there were never any issues of shootings or that type of violence on a massive scale.
Right, and they had the dogs walk around smelling the lockers and stuff like that, and we never had that issue. So it's like, why are you don't focus on only urban communities, like all schools? Why not all schools?
Because I feel like even just the presence of metal detectors, a security guard, could deter somebody from doing something.
Right,
you know what
that's
I mean?
true.
So
That's
I know, Tristan, you have your own business right now that sort of is centered on firearm safety. And how did you talk a little bit about your business and how you started it up and why you started your business?
All right, how I started my business, it initially started when I felt that I needed personal protection. So I went through my trainer, and then I got my CPO. And I got my CPO as a result of living in a pretty rough neighborhood while I was going to school, while I was in college.
Okay.
I witnessed a lot. to say the least. I witnessed a lot of domestic disputes that ended really bad. A few shootings within the neighborhood. So at that point, I felt I needed to protect myself, especially at that time I was living by myself. So I needed some type of protection. So once I did actually get my CPO, I thought that it would be a good idea for me to, since in the Black community, we're never really taught about guns. That's not our thing. to be actually taught the correct way how to do things in safety measures.
Right. I was gonna say they're around.
They're around, but the
pick it up.
Safety measures.
Yeah, not the safety measures and the legalities of it. So I thought that this would be a good way for me to educate the community on the correct way of how to protect yourself within, dangerous situations.
I see. All right. And so you've been doing this now for quite a while, for several years now.
Yes.
And you have many clients. Has there ever been, one of the issues that really revolves around this gun safety issue is that, mental health and mental wellness are a huge factor into whether people feel like certain people should have access to firearms. Mm-hmm. Have you, as an instructor, ever had to evaluate anybody's mental capacity to see whether they were even able to be trained for firearm safety?
Yeah. Absolutely. There have been several people that I've had to turn away because either A, I knew them on a personal level. So I kind of already could gauge what could potentially happen if they legally had a firearm, and depending on how their temper was or what their habits are, I would have to graciously tell them that I personally would not feel right morally giving you, these instructions in order to help you to get a firearm, because in the event something happened, I wouldn't feel right at the end of the day knowing that I could have been responsible for some unwarranted situation to happen with someone's life.
Right, right.
So, I am a woman, and I want to know, what gun would you recommend for me, being that, women, our clothes are more tight fitted and, men, they're more loose. What, small, little petite gun would you recommend? Right? Because I don't want that budging out, my outfit look good.
You want to be cute. You want to be cute.
Yeah. Right. So what would you recommend for me as a woman to carry?
Okay. What I would recommend for you would be a 380. There's something called the Ruger LCP.
Okay.
It's a nice small handgun that you can actually kind of fit inside of. They do have bra holsters too for ladies.
Really?
That is a thing. That is a thing. In the event that you wear fitted clothing, I don't know the accessibility of how easy it is to get to, but I know that's a thing. It's a thing. But there are the bra holsters. There are wallet holsters. And also there are different types of inside the waistband holsters that you can kind of tuck inside or what have you. If you have a larger shirt on that you can kind of put over it, it's very small and compact. So most of the time people wouldn't even know that it's even there.
Okay, thank you.
And I know Michigan is a state where you can carry your firearm openly. You don't have to conceal it, and you can have a pistol on your, on your hip or in a boot strap, as long as it's not covered or concealed.
Yes.
What are some of the pros and cons? And I know Michigan isn't the only state that has that law, but what are some of the pros and cons of carrying concealed versus carrying open?
Well, for my personal opinion, in regards to open carry, I really don't think that open carry is really the best option, only because it scares people. And then I don't think, unless you're in law enforcement, then you really don't need to have an open carry, because I know a lot of law enforcement officers or agencies, they have to have the outside the waist holster. So you see the boys in blue, and they have the outside the waist holster versus the inside the waist holster, because I guess of the easier access it is to get to the firearm. Versus the inside the waistband holster, I feel that it's a lot easier to conceal. And outside the fact, if someone knows that you have a firearm on you, then they already know how to size you up, versus them, the anonymity of them not knowing if you have a firearm on you or not. They might treat you a little differently versus, trying to plot out a plan as to, I know this guy has this firearm right here, so I need to hit from this angle right here, or I need to have this person come from this angle to try to blindside him while I take the firearm from him.
Okay. All right, I got you.
So, I guess in just with everything going on with the school shootings and, even just the different event shootings like in Vegas and stuff, I guess more and more people probably are becoming more aware of just paying attention to what's going on. So I know certain areas like schools, it's supposed to be like a gun-free zone, but in the workplace, what are some rules or regulations in regards to like people who have CCWs in the workplace?
In the workplace, that is something that is determined within your particular job's, I guess, code of conduct.
Okay.
So that will clearly state if it's prohibited for you to have firearms on the premises.
Right.
So that's something that you would have to adhere to, because I know some places they may allow you to leave it in the car, but you can't actually take it inside the building with you.
Okay.
Or some people don't even allow it on the premises at all, so you have to completely just leave it at home, and then you'll get back to it once you get there and once you're out and about.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of how that works.
Yeah, and and like you said, as a result of a lot of these shootings, I think we've been all hearing of proposed legislation to kind of regulate where people can carry, where people can't carry, who can carry, who can't carry, and a couple interesting potential pieces of legislation that I've seen tossed out in the past few weeks have been, one in particular was this red flag law. And that talked about the ability of friends or close friends or family members of a potential gun buyer to stop a seller from selling to a potential buyer because of their background. And how do you guys feel about somebody saying, like, if you feel the need for personal protection, you want to go buy a firearm, and once you register for the firearm, it'll basically let your friends and family know that, hey, this person wants to buy a firearm. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
See, it's like pros and cons to it. Like, for example, like some of the pros could be it weeds out some of the people that do have mental illness or don't really have the capacity to be responsible with firearms. Or the cons could be someone trying to actually take the merit away from someone who's actually legitimately trying to get their license, but they're doing it from some personal spite or some type of situation as to where they just don't like the individual and they just don't want them to. Or it could have been a situation where the person over here is trying to get their CPL and trying to sabotage the other person from getting their CPL so they can have some type of cross situation going on to where they can protect themselves, but this person can't protect themselves.
What I've read in it, though, to my understanding with the red flag law, is that one is temporary, even if it is, and then it has to be credible. It's not like just like anybody can say anything or whatever. It has to be like a legit reason and like backed up with like factual paperwork and everything like that. And and even if it does happen to somebody, it's like temporary. It's not a permanent thing. It's only So I don't know how that differentiates throughout the states. But just from what I read in regards to like Michigan, it's more of a like temporary thing.
Okay.
How do y'all feel overall about, a lot of times what people talk about is the Second Amendment and how we need to uphold the Second Amendment and not allow people to infringe on that right to bear arms. I think a lot of people look at the first part of the Second Amendment, but not look at the reason why we're granted the opportunity to bear arms. A lot of people don't understand that it's really for protection against some tyrannical overthrow by the government. And I think, my mind automatically goes to, like, if the government wanted to disarm or take over in some tyrannical overthrow, it would happen regardless of like whether we had guns or not.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the size and the artillery that we're able to have as individuals is so far below and beneath what the government has in terms of weaponry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like nuclear missiles, unmanned drones, automatic firearms, all these things that we as civilians aren't able to possess. It's like, and they have, not to mention even the size of our military. We have 1.2 million members of active duty military who basically take unadulterated, commands from their officers. So if they say, hey, look, here's what you're doing today. This is what you're doing. No matter whether it's, disarming people or, you know, going to fight another country in our defense. It's like they're going to do whatever the government tells them to do anyway. Right. So how vital is that Second Amendment? You know, like why is this so valuable? Why do people hold it so much a part of themselves? It feels like a personal identity issue instead of like this is something I believe in. Instead of, like I said, this is a part of me and this is who I am. Why do people identify with guns instead of just it being a thing that they like?
Well, I think it could be one of those situations where I have it, so I want it. I have the right to bear arms, so I want to bear arms if I so choose to, regardless to what it was intended for or that the times actually changed and what it's made for now.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're a gun enthusiast and you're covered by the Second Amendment to actually be able to bear arms or have how many ever firearms or what have you, if that's your right, then of course you want your right. Just like, for example, this is going to be an odd example, but say, for example, if you had a coupon and you went to McDonald's and it was a 2-for-1. And you turn it in and then they say, hey, you can't get your 2-for-1 because X, Y, and Z. But wait, it's written right here that I can actually buy one and get one. So I want you to honor my coupon.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing, but not really the same thing, but you get the idea.
Yeah. Like you wanna have your rights honored.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, wanting your rights honored and everything, but I don't really connect the rights honored and regulation like extinguishing each other. Like regulation, it seems to me that the narrative from like people who are for, like it's my right, I want to own I have a right to have the bear arms, versus like some people who are on another side where we need regulation. It's almost like it's one or the other and that's it. That part is like, huh?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I just,
personally,
it's like, I don't get it. Like, I agree. Yeah. Okay. Why not? But why not have regulation? Like, that's the part where it gets confusing to me, where it's just like, well, I don't see why not.
Yeah. I think I fall in that rare middle group of people who, like, I'm a proponent for gun ownership, but my reasons for it, I feel like might be different from a lot of other people's. Mm-hmm. For me, it's for personal protection.
Right, me too.
Like I want to arm myself in case somebody tries to do something, bring some sort of harm upon me or my family.
Right.
It's my obligation to protect my family. So I'm a proponent of gun ownership because I want personal protection.
Right.
I don't care about the Second Amendment, honestly. I mean, the Second Amendment grants me that, right? But outside of granting me the opportunity to own that gun, I don't really identify as a person with the Second Amendment. I'm not like I'm not a constitutionalist, per se. But at the same time, I also feel like it shouldn't be faux pas to discuss reasonable measures getting put in place by Congress, by our legislators, to prohibit people who aren't or who don't have the mental capacity to operate a firearm to be able to get one. So I'm on both sides of the fence. Like I'll jump through a couple loopholes if I know that this is going to provide for the protection of people in mass, not just outside of me. You know what I'm saying? Like go through a background check. Yeah. What's the harm?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not saying you can't have your guns. I'm not saying you can't fully carry out your constitutional rights. Mm-hmm. However, if there is someone who doesn't have the mental capacity, doesn't have the well-being to operate a firearm and to be in ownership of a firearm, just like you said earlier, you've had to turn people away because you weren't fully, you didn't feel like they had the full capacity to operate that firearm in a reasonable, logical, lawful manner, right? So I'm under the same sort of umbrella there, where I feel like if people want to and they have the capacity to operate under a legal and lawful manner, jump through a couple extra hoops, fill out a background check, wait an extra couple weeks.
And I feel like
you have to a driver's license.
And I feel like what's the problem? Like if you have nothing to hide and you're, what's the problem with filling out a background check? That's like even if you get hired at a job, they want to make sure that you're stable and everything is okay to protect everyone that's surrounding you. Mm-hmm. So why not, get a background check? Because I feel like it will prevent a lot of things that's happening today from happening, if you get a background check, because you can't just give somebody something and just send them out in the world and not know who they are as a person. So
and even me saying that, I still have the understanding that if people want to hurt people, they're going to find a way to hurt people.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's it's a double-edged sword. Not like no pun intended, but it's a double-edged sword. Like if somebody wants to hurt somebody, they're going to find out a way to do it. But that doesn't mean that you should not take logical steps in order to provide an extra barrier or a speed bump, if you will. Like if you're traveling down the street, a residential neighborhood, and people are doing 40 and a 25, you throw in some speed bumps because you want to say, all right, you might be doing 40, but if you're doing 40, you're going to hit some bumps along the way that's going to mess your car up. You know what I mean?
Right.
Absolutely.
So it's sort of like that along those lines. Like you're not just going to say, oh, people are going to do 40 regardless, so let's not put in any speed bumps. Same thing with gun legislation. Like yes, you understand that people will harm or hurt or bring danger to other people regardless of whatever laws impede them. However, don't just say, well, we know it's going to happen, so we're not going to do anything. Our hands are tied.
Right.
They're really not,
Yeah.
It brings me to something Obama was saying. You talked about, roads and cars and, the loopholes that people have to jump through even in order to obtain a driver's license.
Right.
One of the things that Obama was saying a couple years ago when he was doing a town hall was the fact that the Center for Disease Control can't even discuss the issue of guns. They can't even research guns and gun violence because there's federal legislation that blocks it. Because they feel like if you come up with some findings that say guns are bad, then they're gonna infringe upon your Second Amendment rights.
I feel like that's a situation of like, damn if you do, damn if you don't, because people feel like it's violating their Second Amendment right. But then again, if you don't do the research and the government don't put more effort into it, people are upset when these mass shootings happen.
Right.
And it's like, okay, what do you guys want? We kind of stuck in between. What do you guys want?
Yeah.
We want the violence to stop, but at the same time, we want to protect ourselves. So I feel like we need to kind of go in and make more laws, or we need to do more evaluation to make sure that people are mentally okay to have these guns that's out here on these streets, because there's so much violence going on and a lot of people don't get mentally evaluated.
Right.
So, and that definitely should be something that's something that should be that's touched on. So
yeah, and I know Tristan is you're a gun advocate, you're a firearms advocate, proponent for personal protection as well, and I know you brought along a couple firearms today to kind of show people what you carry personally.
Yes.
And so I'll just let you take over from there.
All right. So one of my main carrying firearms is a Glock 36. Let's see. Just for the audience at home, just letting you guys know, there are no rounds in here. Also, the gun is not loaded. You always want to make sure that you check to make sure that the gun is right back and that there are no bullets on the inside of the gun. And also that once you take the clip out, there are no bullets or what have you in here, and there's nothing inside chamber as well. So this is a Glock 36, which is a 45 caliber firearm. Subcompact. It holds 6 bullets in the clip plus 1 in the chamber.
Okay.
I like this firearm because it's light. It has good stopping power with 45 caliber bullets. And I can pretty much wear it under most clothing for my inside the waist holster.
And you do conceal carry all the time?
I do conceal carry just because I don't like the extra attention of trying to open carry a firearm, because it just draws too much attention from other people because they don't know what your intentions are. And rightfully so, with everything that's going on right now. You definitely just don't want to be the oddball wearing, an outside the waist holster, and you just walking around shopping in the supermarket and he's got a gun. Wait, no, it's it's just carrying. I'm just carrying. I'm just abiding by exercise my Second Amendment.
Yeah. Right. Now, is that your favorite? Do you have any other favorites or anything like that you like to carry?
I also own a Glock 19, but I didn't bring that one today, which is a subcompact 9mm as well. It holds 15 bullets plus one, which is also very light and very concealable.
Okay.
And then I know earlier today we were talking about guns that women could carry as
Right.
well, and I was telling you about the LCP. It just so happens that I actually brought that one along with me.
Cool.
Let's see.
Can I take it home?
Yeah, no. Once you take my class, then maybe we could, figure something.
Well, can I take it for free after I take the class?
We'll talk.
Okay.
All right, so this is the LCP. This is the Ruger LCP. Also, like I said, the clips, no bullets in here. Also, you always want to make sure that there's nothing inside the chamber. So, this is
Finger
something.
never on the trigger either. If you notice, his finger is never on the trigger.
Yeah.
You don't want to
Yes.
put your finger on the trigger unless you're ready to shoot.
Right.
Absolutely. That's one of the lessons that I teach. What you want to do is you want to hold the gun in what's known as the Y, which means that you hold your hand in the Y shape and you're always handling the gun like this while it's in a Y hold. Okay, so that means that your finger is never on the trigger, so that way it never accidentally goes off because your finger was never on the trigger to begin with.
Right.
And also, you want to make sure that you point it in a safe direction. So this is the Ruger 380. This holds 6 rounds plus one. It's very concealable. It's very good for women to carry because if you're wearing like fitted clothing, you can actually easily conceal this inside of either a wallet holster, and I believe I have a wallet holster in here. Yeah, it's a Ruger. Yeah, so this is what's known as a wallet holster. So what you would do is you would put the gun inside here, and then it actually physically looks like you're holding a wallet in your your pocket.
That's
very,
cool.
very
That's neat
concealable.
like that.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, they have the different bra holsters that women can carry. I know that they do have purse holsters that you can put your firearms inside of the purse. I'm kind of on the fence about that only because, say, if the mugger takes your purse,
Yeah.
then that means they just run off with your firearm too. So it's still kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say it really just depends on, I guess, your lifestyle in which how you dress, what are your habits, where do you typically go to, what do you typically wear when you're going to those places, so that can kind of determine what firearms that you can wear. I know there are certain guns that you may be able to get away with wearing in the wintertime versus the summertime because your clothes may be a bit heftier,
Right.
so
Layered,
a
more layered.
little bit more layers,
Right,
so it's
right.
it's easier to conceal in the wintertime because you have those layers on versus the summertime you're wearing less clothing, so it would be kind of hard to carry something bigger because you're going to see the gun bulge, of course.
Right.
So these are two of my favorite firearms that I like to carry, and they have so far done me very well.
Good.
Okay.
Well, I know. I know the gun debate is one that we could spend hours talking about.
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah.
we really only scratched the surface here, but we do always want to continue the conversation. Whether you guys have comments or questions or concerns, or if you have general expertise about the topic, we would love to hear your comments and have you weigh in as well. But I think that about wraps up this episode of The Grit. It was great coming to you guys with another topic that we feel really impacts our communities. And at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to our my lovely co-host Veronica here.
Remember, guys, push to empower. You guys leave comments below on what you think about tonight's episode, and we'll see you guys next Sunday.
That's been
See
The
you
Grit.
next
We're out.
Sunday.
Chill and chill.